Okay. Maybe Tia or Daniel, could you confirm for me that you see the record button in the corner?
Yeah, you're good.
Great. Thank you. I've got my screen shared, so I'm not seeing it. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. I'm Aline Yell. I am a program coordinator with the Core Network, and I am very excited to be here with you today and present today's topic, which is life after being hired. Along with me today will be Austin Bowley, who is a training coordinator with the Children's Home Society and dedicated to serving the Conservation Corps of the Forgotten and Emerald Coasts crews with training. So I'm very excited to have Austin here with me. And so we are going to go ahead and get started. Of course, we are recording today's session, and the recording will be available on the Gulf Corps YouTube channel by the end of the week. And then also we will address questions at the end of the presentation unless something is really urgent. If you think of questions during the session, just add them to the chat box and we will cover them at the end. And just a couple of housekeeping items in case you are new to Ring Central, which looks a lot like Zoom. But of course, we would appreciate if everyone would mute your microphones to keep background noises to a minimum. And if you want to ask a question or communicate with us during the session, you can use the Ring Central chat feature. And that is on your screen here. And if you click on this chat feature, then you can choose to chat with the entire group or privately by choosing specific participants from their name on the drop-down menu, which is here. So, also, if you would like to be unmuted to ask your question verbally, you can click on the participants button, which is, oops, let me go back, sorry. The participants button is right here. Okay, my pen's not working. But then if you're on your phone, you can use the raise hand feature, which is over here on this side of the screen. Okay, so today's topic is about getting a new job. And sometimes when we get a new job, we might be so excited that we feel like we can take on the world. And getting a new job is one of the most exciting things that we do in life. And it makes you feel like you could conquer anything. But it's also one of the most stressful things in life that we do. There are a lot of things we can do to prepare for our first day of work or to start a new job. And I would encourage anyone when they're starting a new job to check out some of the helpful information that is online. There are a lot of great tips about preparing, and of course things like getting there early and being properly dressed and bringing certain things with you. So we're not going to cover all of that today, but I would encourage even those that may have be a little more experienced, it's a good refresher. So feel free to check that out online. There's a lot of good information. We are going to cover more about becoming a new employee and what can some things that will come up in your first few days or first weeks of starting a new job. And in your first few days on a new job, most companies will conduct new hire orientation with their new employees. And the new hire processing can take from just a short time or even it be extended to several days, depending on your position and the organization. And what we're going to cover today is not meant to duplicate a typical onboarding process, but instead we want to cover a few things that are commonly left out of a typical orientation or it might be topics that you may not have thought to ask about. So we're hoping that with some of this knowledge, you can get through your time as a new employee with a little extra confidence. The topics we're going to cover today are things about getting paid, things related to the basics of budgeting, nothing real technical, but just some basics. And then also about benefits that can be involved in starting a new job. So about getting paid, the first thing we'd like to cover under about getting paid is pay periods. One of the first questions that new hires usually do like to ask is, when do I get paid? And it can make things look a little bad if you come right out and ask that on your first day. But it is usually addressed very early in the process. And what governs when you get paid are called pay periods. So, and they can vary. There's basically 4 different types. It could be a weekly pay period. It could be a bi-weekly pay period, which is every 2 weeks, a semi-monthly pay periods, which are twice a month, and then some are even monthly, once a month pay periods. I have actually had a job where I only got paid once a month, and it was a real challenge to budget that money, believe me. And there's also another aspect of pay periods where when you get paid, you may be paid currently or you may be paid in arrears, which means you don't get paid until sometime after you have finished those hours. So the first one we're going to look at is a weekly pay period. And this is what it can look like. Usually a pay period will cover a calendar week, even if you only work Monday through Friday. And when the company has a weekly pay period, very seldom, if the company does pay currently, then you might get paid at the end of the week, which would be here. But if they are paid in arrears, you may not get paid until the pay date 1 week, or even it could be as far out as 2 weeks after the pay period closes. So as a new employee, that is something you will always want to find out about, and it will, of course, affect your budgeting. You'll want to know if you're getting paid for only 1 week at a time and when that pay will actually happen. In this example, of course, the pay date is the Friday after the period closes, but it could be as many as 2 weeks. This is an example of a 2-week pay period where the pay period starts on a Sunday and then doesn't end until 2 weeks later on a Saturday. And then that whatever hours are worked during that period are not paid until the Friday afterwards. Once again, the pay date could be as long as 2 weeks afterwards. So the thing to consider about that is that means if you started on Monday here, you will have to work an entire 2 weeks and then wait at least 1 week or even as many as 2 weeks to get your first paycheck. And that would mean from your first day until your first paycheck is actually almost a month. So that's something you'll want to be sure that you plan for and have in your consideration when you're starting for your new job and planning your expenses. The third example is the semi-monthly pay period. And that is where on this illustration, the pay period is in peach and it starts here on the 1st and ends on the 15th. Then the second pay period starts on the 16th and ends at the end of the month, which in this example, it's February. So the last day of the month is the 28th. And in a pay period like this, most often the pay periods say from the 1st to the 15th, would likely be paid at the end of the month. And then the second pay period would not be paid until the 15th of the next month. In some cases, some companies do pay currently. That's more an example of if in the situation where the employees are salaried. If the employees are hourly, there's usually some type of delay in payment. And that is, of course, especially to account for overtime pay and to be able to accurately verify everyone's hours and make sure that everyone is accurately paid any overtime. So, in talking about, those are the different types of pay periods. And coming up next, Austin is going to join us to talk about some other things that are going to appear on your pay receipt, especially gross and net wages. And they really aren't gross, they're actually pretty good. And tax withholding. So I'm going to, so Austin, you can take it away.
Hello, everybody. As Eileen said, I'm here to talk about gross versus net wages as well as payroll taxes. So we're starting just by looking at a pay stub because that's probably the best way to really give a good example of what all of these things are and how they affect you. So first off, if you look sort of in the bottom left, you see the year-to-date gross. That is how much you've earned in this whole year in total. But that's before any deductions are taken out of your pay whatsoever. If you look to the right, you see year-to-date deductions and then year-to-date net pay. And so you can see the difference between the net pay and the gross wages are the deductions in the center. So this person has over $1,400 that are taken out of their pay for deductions. So that's just something that's also, when you get a new job, is worth keeping in mind, that whatever wages or salary that may come with it, you're not going to be getting all of that normally directly. You're normally going to have certain things that are deducted from that pay, things like taxes and or benefits for you. There are no benefits really on this pay stub, but Eileen will be talking about certain benefits that may be deducted from your pay later. But yeah, all those things can be deducted from your pay and make the difference between gross wages and net pay. You can see on the right-hand side, there's a list of deductions that are taken out of the pay, and you can see FICA med tax and FICA Social Security tax. So FICA taxes are mandated by law that everyone has to contribute to. The Social Security tax is 6.2% of whatever you earn as an employee, and the Medicare tax is 1.45% of whatever wages you earn in that period. And then it gets deducted from your pay and goes directly to the government. Now, whatever you pay in FICA taxes, oh, sorry, I could hear myself all of a sudden, sorry. Whatever you pay in FICA taxes, your employer also has to match. So while you pay this 60, well, not you, but James Robert, our friend whose pay stub this is, his FICA Social Security tax was $62. That means, and that's just for this pay period. That means that his employer also paid $62 on his behalf for this pay period for that Social Security tax, which in total makes the tax really 12.4% of your wages. And same for Medicare tax, it basically doubles it because your employer pays the other half and makes it 2.9%. Now, the important thing to know about here is if you are ever self-employed, or that includes say driving for Uber or DoorDash or anything like that, those taxes are not included. They're not taken out of your pay beforehand. So when you are reconciling your taxes at the end of the year and you may have Ubered or DoorDashed or anything like that, that's like sort of contracted work, you are supposed to then pay those taxes when you reconcile your taxes, filing your tax return. So about 15%, a little bit more of whatever you earn through those means should be paid as FICA tax, or will be levied on you as an additional tax when you file your tax return. So that's what's important to think about and know if you either work for yourself or if you Uber, Lyft, whatever like that. Because they notoriously do not really help you very much, at least in my experience. They tend not to help you very much when it comes to actually filing your taxes and how you're supposed to do that as a contracted worker for them. Below the FICA taxes, you'll see Fed tax, which stands for the federal income tax. And this is one thing that you can control. And I'll get into that in just a little bit. But a lot of people don't know that they have the power to change how much federal income tax is withheld from their pay for each pay period. Going down the list, you see there's the state tax as well. Most states probably also have an income for their state tax. Florida does not, and I don't think Texas does either. So those two states are certainly exempt, but most states will have a state income tax as well. And then below, there might also be municipality taxes for if you live in a certain city. They might also have income tax that gets taken out. So it really all depends on where you are, and your pay stub can look very different depending on where you live. Additionally, no benefits are listed there, but Eileen will get to that later. So W-4, this is something that employers do not usually do a very good job of conveying the importance of to new employees. Chances are they just give it to you to fill out and don't really tell you what it's about or what it's for. But this is how you control how much federal income tax is withheld from your pay. And the important thing too is if you keep an eye on your pay stub, make sure that whatever you want for your federal income tax withholding, make sure that it is what you want it to be, because you can ask for a W-4 at any time through your employment to change how much is withheld. So if you want to withhold more or you want to withhold less, all you have to do is ask for a W-4, and that will be the new one that's goes on to your record, and it'll change how much is withheld. But let's actually look at the W-4 itself. So the sections that I'm going to go over are just step 1, which shows your personal info, which of course you would just put all that in for your employer. But then I think it's, is that D? It's hard for me to see, honestly. Where it goes over filing status: single, married filing separately, married filing jointly, and then head of household. Normally, people will probably put single, and this is very important. You have to know what your filing status is for the year, for this year, for the time that you are filling this out. So most people would probably be single unless you're married. If you're married and you think that you will want to file together as a couple, then you'd put married filing jointly. If not, you'd put married filing separately. But then head of household is for people who have a dependent. Dependent is basically somebody who you support and lives off of the pay that you receive. So that is mostly people with children. So if you have a child that you take care of, then chances are you are head of household. It's not it's not quite cut and dry like that, but that's basically how it is. So you would mark the right thing there depending on what your filing status is, but you have to know those things sort of beforehand going in. Then we look at step 3. So this W-4 is a little different than W-4s in the past. This is how, I don't know why they changed it to this, but the IRS did. But so step 3 is how you now claim your dependents. You used to claim allowances for however many people were living in your household that you supported, but now you actually have to assign a monetary value to each dependent and then calculate that dollar amount yourself. So if you see it asks for the number of qualifying children that you have under the age of 17, and then multiply that by 2,000. So if you had 3 kids that were all under 17, then you would put 6,000 in that box. And then say you didn't have anyone else, then you would just bring the 6,000 all the way down to the bottom of that step 3. And so the important thing is that the higher the number is here at the end of step 3, the higher that number, the less they will withhold from your pay. The reason being, theoretically, the more money that you have in that box, the more you have to spend on family members and to support them. So they don't want to take your money out for income tax because they want to give that to you so that they can make sure that you're supporting your family. So generally speaking, the larger the number in this box 3, the less they will withhold from your pay. And that's really important to understand when you're going into this, especially just because you may not want so much, you may want more withheld. So you may have to make an exception or plan accordingly. But you can basically follow the instructions for step 4 to make other adjustments. Or if you have multiple jobs or if your spouse also works, then you would follow step 2 as well. But the most important ones I was going over were just step 1 and step 3. So I'll go on to the next slide. Okay, so going over just briefly what the Social Security tax, the FICA Social Security tax is that's withheld from everyone's pay. I just wanted to go over that briefly so that you all know what your taxes are going towards, because I think that that's an important thing for everyone to know. Anything that is taken out for the FICA Social Security tax is put into a trust fund that's earmarked specifically for retirement, survivor, and disability benefits to fund those benefits for those people. As a general rule, the more you contribute to your Social Security FICA taxes while you're working, the more you will be able to benefit once you retire. Generally speaking, it's not the only rule that, it's not the only thing that affects how much you may be able to take out when you retire, but it is part of it. And then one estimate from the Social Security Administration says that half the US residents 65 and older receive 50% of their income from Social Security. So Social Security is a really important form of income for older Americans, being that it's 50% for, is that, yeah, it's 50% of older Americans' income of half of sorry, I can't even speak. It's 50% of half of the U.S. residents above 65 and older's income, which, as you can imagine, Social Security is not usually, doesn't dish out a ton of money, but it's really helping those folks. Additionally, it's 90% for a quarter of those people. So a lot of people really depend on this as a form of income to keep, just to keep living past 65, because once you're 65 and you retire, oftentimes your income dries out. Additionally, it keeps 22 million people out of poverty, most of those people being older folks who no longer have a source of income. So this is something that we all pay in towards to help people who have worked, you know, through 65 or through 60 or whatever, to keep them going and living a healthy life out of poverty. So go to the next slide. And this is the Medicare tax, just very briefly. This one helps cover healthcare costs for older Americans, as well as certain disabled Americans who are younger. And it can help cover hospital costs, premiums for health insurance, and prescription drug costs as well. And then same as Social Security, if you pay into it now as a worker, then theoretically it makes you eligible for it later when you retire, to help cover some of your medical costs. But yeah, so that's basically my rundown of payroll taxes. And now I'll turn it back over to Eileen to carry on.
Great. Thank you, Austin. That was wonderful. Thanks for that explanation. I know, like we've said to start with, these might be things that no one has taken the time to explain. And so, but it's important and it's helpful to know. Even if we may not be starting a new job right now, that may be coming in the future. And so this can be helpful information for you to have when you walk into that new job or that next job, and this paperwork and some topics come up, you'll have a little bit more information that you're kind of armed with, so to speak, and you can ask better questions, or you know where you need help or where you don't need help. And some of these topics may even come up so that you may find that you want to do some more research on your own about these things. So thanks again, Austin. The next thing we're going to look at, something else that is also, as he mentioned, can be withheld from your pay is insurance. So we're going to talk a little bit about the different types of insurance that your new job might offer. The different types of insurance, the first most common type is health insurance. And that's a category that can include medical, dental, and vision coverages. However, medical insurance is required by the federal government for certain employers to offer if they have over 50 employees. So if you take a job with a smaller organization, they may not be required by the federal government to offer health insurance. So you might want to be aware of that. You may want to try to obtain coverage on your own, which independent insurance companies in local communities do offer that. And then even more specific requirements can vary from state to state, but the federal requirement line is employers with over 50 employees must offer insurance. But there can be a lot of specific details that, like I said, vary from state to state. And how these insurance coverages are paid for varies greatly also. From some employers pay all of it, which would be a great situation. And then some employers pay none of it. It's simply offered and employees can take it if they would like, and the employee pays for the entire cost. And then most situations, though, are somewhere in between, where employers pay at least a portion of the coverage, and then the rest of it might be required to be paid by the employees. And then, of course, it can also be different offerings for the employee, and then any spouse or children that that the employee might have. So also sometimes employers might pay for the employee portion, but not spouses or children. So like I said, it varies greatly from company to company and from state to state. So when this portion of your new hire training does happen with a new employer, be sure to ask plenty of questions. You might even want to write your questions down and take them with you, have them prepared, and even note the answers. Some employers will give you information in writing, like they may call them plan documents, or they may give you links to look at online for the companies that carry their insurance, because that can be companies that you may have or have not heard of, such as Blue Cross Blue Shield, United Healthcare, Aetna, Cigna, all kinds of big companies. Or if it's a smaller organization, it may be a more locally based plan. So when there are costs for these coverages, if you elect to take these coverages, the costs will be withheld from your paycheck, whatever the employer does not pay. And these costs could be either before or after taxes, depending on the type of coverage. The next type of insurance is called disability coverage, disability insurance. And that normally falls into two groups, which is short-term and long-term. You've probably heard of them: short-term disability, long-term disability. And this kind of insurance is meant to replace a portion of your income, not all of it, but it is an income replacement coverage for situations like pregnancy or illnesses and injuries that did not occur as part of your job. Injuries that occur on the job are covered under workers' comp, which we'll talk about in a moment. If you are, if an employee becomes pregnant, sick, or injured when they're not on the job, then it falls under the health coverage. If it is extended beyond normal sick time in order to recover, then it falls under disability. And that's what it means, is that if it's more than just what would take a normal period of sick time to recover from something, then it falls under the disability category. And that length of time can vary also from state to state. So the other thing to keep in mind with disability coverage, like I mentioned, is it only replaces a portion of your pay. Say if you are seriously injured or have a serious surgical procedure, then you may collect paid sick time if your company offers it for, say, a week or 7 days. Then it goes under disability, and then at that point, you may only receive 40% of your pay until you return to work. Depending on whatever, that percentage will vary depending on the coverage. So it's also meant to try to encourage employees to return to work and not to pretend that they're disabled when they're really not. And some companies offer an additional amount of coverage that employees can purchase if they would like to. And it would increase that percentage of income that the disability coverage replaces. It might increase it from 40 is typical. It may increase that to 60 or 70% of your income. So, but every company doesn't offer that, but it might be an option. And once again, any cost for this purchase would be withheld from your pay. Then if you are injured due to a situation that happens at work, that falls under workers' compensation. And excuse me, this workers' compensation is required by law for employers to pay into a state program, and this is governed by the states. It only applies to injuries that occur as a part of your job, and like disability, it only replaces a portion of your pay. And if you do fall in this type of situation, it also the whole situation must be verified, monitored, and controlled by a doctor, either of the employer's choosing or that is within the state's list of like approved workers' comp doctors or specialists. So the employee doesn't have a lot of control over these situations, but that is how workers' comp works. Then the last type of insurance that we're going to talk about is life insurance. This is often offered by employers, and excuse me, it's usually paid for by the employer. And life insurance is what would be paid to your beneficiaries in the event of your death under certain covered situations. And once again, this is very specifically specified by the plan documents about what kind of situations are covered. And the employee must designate who their beneficiary or beneficiaries would be. Excuse me. Life insurance is usually offered at no cost to the employees, and it is usually a set amount for everyone. It might be $25,000, it might be $50,000, it might be $100,000 of life insurance, but it's usually a set amount. However, some employers offer, once again, additional coverage that employees may want to purchase for themselves, and they may offer life insurance for spouses or children. If employees do choose to purchase these additional coverages, then once again, the cost comes out of your paycheck. Okay, the last topic that we're going to cover about things that come out of your paycheck is retirement. And retirement programs, just as the name implies, are it's a savings type program to help you once you retire from regular working, which is usually in the mid to upper 60s age. And this would be in addition to what Austin was just telling us about with Social Security and Medicare, but especially Social Security as a basic portion of income to supplement. And most people can't live off what the government allows them to have for Social Security. So to supplement that and make it a livable income, you would need retirement. And there are different types of retirement programs that different employers may offer. One type is called a pension plan. And a pension plan is different from what we normally think of retirement, like 401ks and things like that. A pension plan is very specific and very controlled. It's only contributed to by the employer. And this would be spelled out in the information that you would be given as a new employee. But if your company has a pension plan, then it's put into a fund for each employee and can only be withdrawn at retirement age, or most pension plans do allow that if an employee leaves the company, they can cash it out or they can leave it. So, but you do not contribute to your pension plan. What you can contribute to is what's normally referred to as a 401k. And that is where you have money withheld from your paycheck. It goes into a savings type of program, and then it is invested in different options. And I'm not really going to get into a lot of those details because I'm not a retirement expert, but there are lots of financial experts around who do this for a living, for financial planning, for individuals with retirement. However, a 401k would be offered by a publicly traded company. For nonprofits, the program is called a 403b, but it works basically the same way. Then state and local governments offer a similar program called a 457b. It's just different types for different, depending on who you work for. And then there are individual accounts called IRAs, which stands for Individual Retirement Account, IRA. And that's where you would have an individual account that would be set up with a separate company outside of your employer. And you can contribute to that from your income. So these are just some of the basics about retirement plans. And Ever, I wanted to offer that Austin could chime in here and share a little bit if you would like to help. He has a lot of great financial knowledge, as you can tell. So Austin, is there something you'd like to share with us about retirement plans?
Yeah, I think the only thing is the importance of retirement for your for tax purposes. So generally, money that you contribute to a retirement account, either through your employer or to your own private IRA, that's money that can be deducted straight from your income, so you won't get taxed on it the year that you put it into that account. So it's up to a certain amount, of course. I think it's like 5,000 or 5,500 maybe. Um, yeah, but so you have the ability to take off, about $5,000 from your pay of taxable income, which can lower your, um, uh, if you lower your taxes when you reconcile with them at the end of the year. So retirement can be a really powerful tool for a lot of people um, who really um, who really know how know their way around it. Additionally, a lot of 401ks, and I don't think I heard you mention this, Eileen. Their employers may match whatever you put in up to a certain amount, so you can really max out your retirement account fairly simply, well, with some planning, if you really maximize the usage of your employer matching your own contributions. Um, so there's a lot to sort of look into with retirement plans and see how they can benefit you. And it's also just important to start early. Earlier the better, because then you give the money in that account time to invest and accrue interest. Um, so the earlier you start is always the better.
Excellent. Thank you, Austin. And I did think of one more thing we can throw in here, especially about the, well, any of the retirement funds types of savings plans, is that when you leave an employer, you would have the choice to leave it in that retirement account, and then you can start withdrawing it when you do retire, or you can roll it over to your next employer's retirement plan so that it all kind of follows you, or you can funnel it out to an IRA so that you still don't have to pay taxes on it, but it can collect in an account that way. So when you leave an employer, you don't lose it. Like I said, it either stays there, it can go with you, or you can put it in an IRA. And like, just want to reiterate what Austin said, it's the best idea to start young. When you start working very early in your career, you may think you've got plenty of time, but you don't. And if you start saving a little bit now, like I said, the employer match can kick in. It just multiplies your money. And then you let it grow over 20, 30, 40 years. And then you've got a nice retirement supplement to your Social Security income. So, and I do encourage you, do some online research of your own or speak to a financial planning expert. There are plenty of them around and they would love to talk to you about it. So feel free to get more information. The next thing we're going to talk about kind of briefly, the time is marching on. So do want to bring up budgeting basics. When we're starting a new job, especially if we're making more money than we did previously, I know it can be really exciting, especially that first paycheck, even if it's direct deposited. Feels so wonderful and you just want to spend it and do something fun with it. But we usually have things like rent to pay, groceries to buy, a car to pay for, or some type of transportation. Even if you're taking the train or the bus or whatever, it's still got to be paid for. Utilities, air conditioning isn't free, especially we know in the South. You may have debts already to pay, credit cards, student loan debts, and then of course personal expenses where you might, so that possibly you can enjoy a movie every now and then or something. You can see on the screen there are some percentages listed out, and this is just a guide. There are lots of ways to split up a budget. The important thing is to do it, to have something, and to allocate 25 to 30% of your income towards either rent or your house payment is a good guide. Because also too, when you're starting a new job, you may encounter, or as you're working and then you decide, I'm going to get a new place, or I'm going to move out of, say, my roommate situation, or if you're living with parents or something like that. How much rent can you afford? Well, looking at your monthly income and taking 25 to 30% as a guide is a good basic. So if you start allocating more towards your rent, then by necessity, you're going to have to spend less on groceries, less on your transportation, because your paycheck is a finite amount. It's only so much. So use some percentages to plan. And it can, like I said, also be a good guide for if you're trying to decide how much you might be able to afford to spend. And in setting up a budget, you may not want to carry around a lot of cash. That's also kind of some good advice usually. You might want to, you can use separate bank accounts to separate money towards different purposes, like your rent and groceries or something. You can even, if you do withdraw your money in cash, you may want to use the old envelope method. It's old-fashioned, but it still works. Having an envelope labeled for your different categories, and every paycheck, you know, $100 goes in this envelope and $100 goes in that envelope or whatever. It's not usually the safest. It's safer in a bank, but the important thing is to stick to your budget and stick to your plan. You can also withdraw only a set amount, say per paycheck. If if I can afford $40, say a week, that I can spend any way I want, then that's the only $40 I'm going to carry around in my pocket. Because usually if we have cash in our hands, we tend to spend it. You can also have savings automatically withdrawn from your paycheck and deposited. And another helpful tip is to perhaps set up payment reminders on your phone. And the last category we're going to talk about is benefits. And this is another category that can vary greatly from company to company. Not really going to spend a lot of time on the details, but just some things to think about. Especially benefits can fall into some bigger categories, like paid time off, like you can see in these categories. It can be separated into things like sick leave, personal leave, paid vacation time, or some employers lump it all together and call it PTO or paid time off. Whichever way it works, it's different time that you might be paid for different reasons. Other employers say your sick time might not be paid, but your vacation time is, and you might earn it gradually, or you might be granted an amount at a certain period, or you may not get any paid time off for the first 6 months or the first year. All depends on the employer, but it's definitely information you'll want to find out about. And there can also be paid company holidays. Things like New Year's and Memorial Day coming up this month, 4th of July, Labor Day, things like that. So that might afford for some paid time off that can be offered as a benefit. Then beyond that, some employers offer extras. We've already talked about over here different insurance policies that might be available, and the retirement plan. But those are things that are going to usually cost you. So that will come out of your paycheck. And here's the vision care for some insurance also. However, some employers offer extras, things like a fitness center on site or discounts at local gyms. Others might have on-site daycare or off-site daycare discounts at partner organizations. Some employers can also offer things like student loan repayment assistance or tuition reimbursement for taking college classes. So those can also be things that you will want to ask about or find out about, and be sure that you take advantage of as a new employee. So after covering all these different, perhaps drier type topics and parts of being a new employee, we thought we would wrap it up with something a little more amusing. here's a short video called You Got This. And it's about your first week, what your first week might be like at a job, but especially some things not to do when you're a new employee. So.
A new job means new responsibilities, new people, new relationships,
I'm sorry. I didn't realize it would turn the sound off.
and new ways to screw it all up. One way to do that is to try too hard to immediately impress people. Instead, just be yourself and follow these simple steps. You got this. On your first day, just make sure you get there on time. And when you do, make the most of your introductions. Be confident, smile, and make eye contact.
Hello, I'm Tim.
Hi, I'm Diane.
Do whatever you need to do to remember names. If it helps, try repetition or word association.
Diane. Because you dye your hair.
I don't dye my hair.
You sure it's not Liane?
It's your first week, so don't put up a front like you know everything already because, well, you don't.
Here's your desk. If you come with me, I'll show you where the kitchen is.
No need, Hank. I've got this all under control.
My name's Jim.
Another very important tip. Respect your coworker's personal space. Nobody wants you to be leaning over him or invading his desktop with your stuff. And try not to be noisy. Converse with people, but avoid small talk and only be social when it makes sense to be. And when you do start making friends,
Want to see something cool?
Yeah.
make sure it's with the right people. Above all else, don't stress. Nobody's going to remember your mistakes 3 months from now.
Tim, I was wondering if you could show Michael around and help him get settled in.
By that time, you won't be the new guy anymore.
Pleased to meet you, Hank. Let me show you around. It's Michael.
Oh well, seems like you at least got most of this.
Okay, great. All righty, so we've got a few minutes left. If anyone would like to ask any questions. Austin, before we get to that, I did want to point out to everybody, of course, Austin Bowley, our training coordinator with Children's Home Society, has been with us today, and this is his contact information. Here's my information. I'm with the Core Network, and we are happy to support you in your professional development going forward. So feel free to reach out to us if we can help you with anything. And Austin, are there any questions in the chat box?
Yeah, we do have one. He was asking if you work from home and injure yourself, can you claim workers' comp?
As far as I understand it, no, you cannot, because you're not contributing. Well, if I should say, okay, work from home. I'm assuming you mean self-employed. If you're self-employed, you would not be able to claim workers' comp. If you're working from home, but you're an employee, that would be something you would ask your employer about. It would be, it's kind of iffy, as my response would be, but the safest thing would be to ask your employer. It's possible in certain situations that workers' comp could cover you, but there may be quite a verification process that everything would have to go through. Okay, any others? Let's see, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Did we have any other questions in the chat box, Austin?
No, that was the only one.
Okay. Did anyone else have a question they would like to bring up now before we close it out? Last chance. Going, gone. Okay. Well, we will go ahead and wrap it up then. Thanks everybody for your time and for being here. Hope you enjoyed it and might have even learned a little bit. And so we hope that everybody has a great rest of your day. Thanks a bunch. See you later.
Thanks, Eileen. Thanks, Austin.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, everyone.